There comes a point in everyone's life where they want to take a certification so that way they can say, look, Mom, I did it. And today was the day that I decided to say, look, Mom or Dad, I did it. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. You're looking at someone who's now certified security analyst. All right, let's get into it, shall we?
Like, comment, subscribe. Okay, thanks.
Now I've gotten my CompTIA Security Plus, I've gotten Net Plus, I've gotten CAS Plus at this point, but I did not think any of those were anywhere near as difficult as this exam. Now, don't get me wrong, I've been doing networking now for a couple of years, I've enjoyed it, but this certification really made me dig my boots in pretty deep into the ground. Now, unlike all the other certifications, where it's all theoretical and here's a book and you're supposed to memorize it, this certification essentially is entirely hands-on, from beginning to very end. It does not lie when it straight up tells you that it's a hands-on certification. So first off, for anyone wondering, hey, is this going to land me a job right off the bat? The answer is no, okay? HR doesn't really see this certification. And for those who want to say, oh yeah, they do, they know all about it, they don't. Because only roughly about 750 people have actually completed the certification. Now, for you tech gurus out there, it will actually allow you to have some form of conversation during an interview. However, I will say this, in order to do this exam, you have to complete their entire course. So you might be asking or saying, well, that's okay. I can just put the YouTube videos on and then just play a video game on the side. Unfortunately, that's not how this certification works, you see. Here in the job roles path, if we scroll on down to SOC Analyst, you'll see that there's 167 sections, otherwise known as 15 modules. Now, you have to go through all of these in order to actually be able to have a chance of taking the exam. So your next question might be asking, well, how long does that take? Well, for me, it took about a month of time to go through everything. Now, for others, it might take 2 months, it might take 3 months, it might even take 2 weeks. It depends on how much time you put into it, because you're quite literally doing all of the exam work hands-on, or module work in this case. So let's start off with the learning material. The learning material for the exam is extremely well done, extremely well done. Now, I've studied at this point about 5 certifications. This has to be the most hands-on, very interesting information that I have ever read in terms of anything to do with security. Someone who wrote these modules actually put love into them. Now, transitioning from the modules over into the exam, in my honest opinion, I feel like you learned just enough as long as you're not skim reading through everything. So let's get into the exam. As you can see here, the exam targets entry-level security analysts, SOC analysts, penetration testers, IT admins, basically the entire beginning bulk of people, which is why personally I think it's definitely a good certification that you should take. The transition over from modules to the exam is what I would like to say kind of night and day, because on the modules it will guide you and tell you, hey, this is what you're supposed to know and such, but when you get to the exam, things are a little bit different. For example, in this exam, you do not have a proctor like you normally would with other exams. You have 7 days to complete everything that's handed in front of you. What is that? Good question. There's 2 different incidents with 1 major commercial grade level report that you have to create. Now, for me, it took 3 days in order to go over the incidents and 3 days in order to write up the entire report. So in total, I spent about roughly 6 days in order to finish the exam. Now, during my exam period, I also ran into a point where I had a networking issue. I messaged Hack the Box about it, and they gave me an extra day. So that was really cool of them, honestly. So if you run into problems, just talk to them. They'll be more than happy to help you. They're not mean people. Anyways, once you go into the exam, prepare to grab your notebook that you had previously for all the modules and get ready to use it a lot. You're allowed to use Google. You're allowed to basically use the entirety of the internet to answer the questions and be able to get the results. Now, right off the bat, you're going to notice that you're going to have to answer 16, 18, or 20 out of 20 questions. I've noticed that this varies quite differently depending on the months. So certain times that you only have to do 16 questions, certain times you only have to do 18. This is only the first part of the exam that you have to answer. Then after that, you have to create the report. But for the first 20 questions, it's kind of helping you to be able to figure out what exactly you're looking for. So for example, the first question is to do with the very basic reconnaissance, if you will. Then it goes all the way into the exploitation, into the posts, everything, basically from start to end. So if you're wondering where to start with your very first question that's asking you in the exam. Now, something that's also not said is that this exam, something that's also not said though, is that with this exam, all your answers have to be in MD5 hashes, which means that every time you get an answer, say it's Ooga Booga, that's your answer. You're normally typing Ooga Booga. No, you have to run it through and get the MD5 hash of Ooga Booga and type in the MD5 hash. And that is going to be your answer. It's always going to be MD5 hashes. One thing that I would really wish I knew going into this exam, if I had to do it all over again, is understanding how Elastic and Splunk works a lot more. Now, inside the modules, like I said before, they give you the basics as to what you need to be understanding or knowing how to do. But when you actually have to use Elastic and Splunk inside the exam, it's a lot more complicated than inside the modules. More than likely because they expect you to be Googling, for example, more in-depth queries and things of that nature. So if you want to be extra prepared for this exam, I would strongly suggest that you look into more advanced techniques to deal with Splunk as well as Elastic. Otherwise, though, I think it was super solid. And I can't get into much more information to do with the exam itself in that respect because I'm behind a quote-unquote NDA. Now, the certification cost, let's talk about that. If you're a student, the certification cost is dramatically lower than if you're not a student. Therefore, I would highly recommend that you use a school email rather than using, say, your personal email. Just that way your certification costs go way down. All the courses for the certification are held underneath one monthly subscription, which is like $8 a month. It's almost nothing and definitely worth it compared to other places. The other thing to keep in mind is that you're not going to know the results for at least a month. They say anywhere between, I think it was 15 to 20 business days, or working days rather. That's Monday through Friday. You're not going to be getting an answer from that depending on the batch that you get for like a good month. It's just how it is. 30 days roughly, then you're going to get it. They do pretty well in terms of the speed that they cycle through everything, but it's roughly 30 days, so don't panic. Now, something else that I personally don't like, but I'm just gonna say it here anyways, is that when you get your certification, you have to pay for it. You have to pay for a physical copy. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand that, you know, we have to make money, everything else, but if I'm already paying for the certification, I don't see why I have to pay in addition to get my paper copy. Now, in addition to that, there's only one real way of purchasing it, and that's through their shop. And then they, of course, personalize it and things of that nature. I don't know. When I was going through the CompTIA certification originally, I got my certifications in the mail. And it was no issue. But alas, at least it's going to be a bit more personalized. And in addition to that, because you have to pay for it, you also get this really nice shirt. So, oh. It's over here. So it's quite nice, honestly. It's pretty good quality. But that's my only personal pet peeve when it comes to the certification and the pricing. In my opinion, you should get your physical copy no matter what. And then if you want like something fancy or this t-shirt, then it should be, say, separate. You shouldn't have to pay for your physical copy as well. In addition to that as well, your physical copy doesn't actually have your credential ID either. So it's not like, for example, CompTIA, where if you have the piece of paper, your cert ID's on it. It's not how that works either, which is kind of weird. But anyways, I guess technically you could just print out the piece of paper that they give you for your certification. If I had to rate the certification, personally, I would give it a 7.5 or an 8, probably the highest score I've ever given a certification thus far, into how good of information and how satisfied I was to deal with this cert. It was extremely nice. The customer support was super awesome as well. And the pricing honestly wasn't that bad for this level of certification. And the learning with it as well for the academy is actually super solid. I wasn't originally going to do another certification with Hack the Box, but because of how good the learning material is, I personally feel that I would do really well having the penetration tester certification. So I'm going to be looking into that on a personal note, and I hope you guys take care. So anyways, I'll see you.